In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a realistic t-shirt mock-up in Photopea. Hi there and welcome to the video. My name's Gareth and today I'll be showing you how to make a realistic mock-up. I'm going to use this image here as a starting point, which is in the description below if you want to check that out and download it for yourself. And also the design file I'll be using for the t-shirt graphic is also in the description, so you can follow along with exactly the same images that I'm doing. So this is quite a nice shot. I like it because the t-shirt's quite plain. But what we're going to do first, I'm just going to create a blank layer and I'm just going to press S for my clone stamp tool, or you can click the button at the side and change the source to current and below. And I'm just going to quickly remove that. So click Alt or Option to designate your source area where you're going to be pulling texture from, and then click down to clone over the area required, because I just don't want the existing logo showing up in my design. There's a little bit visible on the side of his arm here. I'm not worried about that. Okay, and I like to name all my layers because it's just good practice to be organized, especially if you end up with a file with a lot of layers. So because I know the stages I'm going to need to do for this image, I'm just going to make myself a couple of empty folders at the moment just to keep things organized. So this one is going to be color of the t-shirt, and this one's going to be design. Some actual like logo or design will be kept in there. So let's start with the design. Now I've got a graphic here, which is actually an Illustrator file. Again, it's in the description for download. And I'm just going to drag it from my desktop. You can't see me doing this, but I'm just dragging it from my desktop, bringing it straight into the document here. Now, as you can see, it's just this black and white graphic, but it has got this. Let me just drag it up so you can see. It has got this little watermark at the bottom, public domain vectors. Well, it's not a watermark, but it's just like a little bit of extra text. And I'll show you how to get rid of that in a second. So I'm just going to roughly position it on my t-shirt where I want the design to go. Okay, so let's just get rid of that bit of extra text at the bottom. Now, let's call it logo. Now, this is a smart object, and within this smart object, it's actually a vector file. So let me show you what I mean. So double click on the actual layer icon. You can tell it's a smart object because there's that little square design in the bottom right corner of the layer icon itself there. Double click into that, which will take you to the contents of the smart object. Now, really quickly, what a smart object is it's a layer in Photopea that contains other layers. So it's almost like a group or a folder, but it's actually all compressed and hidden within one layer. So as you can see in this is actually the components that make up the logo that we downloaded. So some kind person had uploaded it in a vector format with all separate shapes. And this just means we can turn things on and off easily without having to erase them or anything. And I know this bottom group folder here, if you just turn the eyeball icon off, it'll make that bit of text at the bottom disappear. And now once we've done that, we want to save, because we're within the smart object at the moment. So you want to save this. So you press Command or Control S, or you can just go File, Save. And as you can see, that said it's basically saved and updated the smart object. So when we close this now, as you can see on the main image, that text is gone. Normally you wouldn't have to worry about this, or you could just put a layer mask on the layer and mask it out. Now you couldn't erase straight on this layer because it's a smart object, but it needs to be kept in a smart object, and I will show you why in the end. It's quite important for a mock-up. So now we've got that roughly in place, we just want to make some tweaks. So Command or Control T to go into your transform. I'm trying to teach you the sort of basic shortcuts here as well, just to make you a bit faster when working. I want to say Command or Control. It's just because on a Mac, which I use, it's the Command key, but on a PC it'd be Control. So now we're just going to make this align a little bit more with the t-shirt because he's facing slightly to the side, whereas this at the moment is facing completely forwards. But it's not too bad, so we're just going to maybe bring this edge in, and if you right click, you can go distort's quite a good one. It just lets you take the corners, individual corners, and all I'm doing is trying to follow it's called the plane of the t-shirt, which is, if it was a flat surface, where would it be facing? And this is just slightly to the side. You'll get used to this if you practice, but if you've got a straight on t-shirt, then you don't have to do any of this. You can just use it exactly as is. That's fine for now. Okay, so there's a couple of steps to make our t-shirt logo more realistic, because at the moment it looks like an obvious graphic, and if we drag the opacity down, you might think, well, fade it back. It still looks like a sort of composited graphic, but now just faded and flat. So two things we can do straight away is I'm going to go to Filter, Distort, and Ripple. Now, for some reason, this was set at 999, so it looks horrendous, but it shouldn't be at that. So what we're going to do is, for this one, if you change the size to large, and for the amount, I found that 40 works quite well. And if I turn the preview on and off, if you look at the graphic, you can see it's just adding those small ripples in, those small mini sort of creases. And it's just giving it more of an impression that it's on a fabric t-shirt rather than a perfectly circular logo, which wouldn't really be possible. So that's one thing to do. Another thing is see we've got a big crease coming up here from the bottom left of the t-shirt that goes into the logo. What's quite nice to do sometimes if you have something like that that's going over the logo is go to the Filter and Liquify menu. Okay, let me just zoom in on this. Always seems to zoom out on mine in Liquify for some reason. So now we've got the background turned on, so we can actually see the t-shirt, but we are on the layer of the logo, so it's only going to liquefy that. Now what I want to do here is, where this fabric folds and it's coming into the logo, I just want to push that in a little bit. I might bring these settings down just so they're not strong. And we're just going to push this in, because really if that crease was there, the logo wouldn't be sitting perfectly flat over the top of it. It would sort of fold around it a little bit. Now, you don't have to do this much. You don't have to do this at all, but I think it really helps to sell it. Just something like that. So it's just almost like tucking around that crease. So we'll click OK. Okay, so just those two things have helped to make it look a little bit better already. Now, to really bring this home, what we want to do is add some t-shirt texture almost back on top of the logo, because the trouble is, if you go and try blending modes to try and get some of the texture showing through, let's say you use multiply is going to get rid of all the white, but the black's still very black, so it's still, at the moment, it still doesn't look very good. And you can try all different blending modes, but you could do that one and that kind of works, but then it makes the colors all a bit strange. So one thing I love to do to give you ultimate control is, I'm just going to turn that off for a sec. I'm going to go to the background layer. I'm going to press M for my rectangular selection. And I'm just going to select a big area that goes beyond where the logo or the design is. And then I'm going to press Command or Control J, which will jump that onto a new layer. So as you can see here, this is just this. We want to do it from the background and not anywhere above. Now this is basically just a bit of the t-shirt that we're going to use for the texture. So we drag this up above the actual logo. So if I turn that back on, obviously it's just the original background on top of everything, so it looks like we've gone back to the original. But what you need to do here is hold your Alt or Option key, Option if you're on a Mac, Alt if you're on a PC, and click on the texture layer icon there. And what this will do is it will clip it to the logo. Now, what this means, and when you see this little arrow on the left hand side of the layer icon, it means it's clipped, so I can undo it and then redo it by holding Alt and clicking. And that just means that that layer there is only going to appear on any pixels that are visible on the layer below. So if I change the color of this, what we need to do is desaturate this anyway. So a quick way of doing this is, whilst you're on the texture layer, just press Command and U, to bring up the hue saturation effect. Now this isn't the adjustment layer version. This is applying it straight onto the layer. So it's destructive, but I know we just need to desaturate it. So that's fine with me. So we just take the saturation all the way to the left and click OK. And now you can see it a little bit more clearly because we've got this desaturated circle. So that texture now is only affecting this. Now to the final point of this texture is to change the blend mode, because at the moment it's just covering everything up. But if we change this to hard light, all of a sudden you can see what's happening. So it's bringing that texture almost over the top of the design, back over the top of the design. And this is a great way to do things because you can have ultimate flexibility. For example, if I now go back to the logo layer and I drop the opacity down, I think about 70-ish% works well on this. So it's got a bit of a faded look. Otherwise, it just looks too full on for me. I like it to be a bit of a vintage look. So now we've got that. And the hard light texture layer on the top, see, it's just giving it that believability. It's just letting that texture come through, and now it actually looks like it's printed on the t-shirt. But again, you can now adjust the opacity of this. So if we reduce the opacity of the texture layer, it will just make that sort of distressed look in the texture less obvious. So you can take it down again to your taste, so you have an element of that, but maybe it's a little bit newer looking, a little bit cleaner looking. And then we could up the opacity of the logo itself a little bit. And we've still now got an element that looks like it's printed on the t-shirt, but it's not as distressed and vintage looking. But I quite like that sort of distressed sort of look, so I'm going to leave it like that. So that's our design and logo section. And if you can see down here, just that liquefying to tuck it around that crease earlier, it's just made a real difference, and it really makes it look like it's sitting on the t-shirt. The second part to this tutorial is the t-shirt itself and colouring the t-shirt and being able to easily colour the t-shirt. So we'll go down to our colour folder. Now for this, I would use the pen tool because you need to make a very accurate selection of the t-shirt. You can't do any kind of quick select or magic wand or anything like that, because if the selection isn't absolutely precise, if you push the colour too much, it'll be bleeding out onto the background and you'll have all these white edges. So if you don't know how to use the pen tool, or you've never used the pen tool, I recommend just going onto YouTube and just typing pen tool beginner tutorial Photopea, or even Photoshop, because they work very similarly. I'm not at the point where I'm going to make a pen tool tutorial just for this video, so even if it means going to someone else's channel, if you really need a beginner's tutorial on the pen tool, just do a quick Google search, go through a couple of exercises, and you'll have it nailed down in no time. So press the pen tool icon, or press P as a shortcut. Make sure that it's set to path and not shape, otherwise it will start drawing a solid vector shape. And then I'm going to be nice and close in, and I was just going to go around the t-shirt with a path. I'm not going to do this all now because it took me quite a while, and you don't want to sit here watching me do this. So I'll just undo that. And in the paths panel, I've already made a full path to save time, and you can see how precise it is. I'm just cutting out those little bits of fluff, but it's as accurate as I could get it. And the more extreme the color change, the more likely you are to see problems from inaccurate masks. Now, for anyone that really doesn't want to use the pen tool, you can use the Polygonal Lasso tool here. Again, zoom in. Oh, by the way, if you hold Z and scroll, or sorry, move your mouse or tablet pen left or right, it's a quick shortcut to zoom in and out, rather than pressing Command or Control and +++ or using the actual magnifier tool. So even if I was on like the brush tool, for example, if I just hold Z, I can zoom in and out, and then as soon as I let go, it will go back to the brush tool, or it should do anyway, but it's stuck a bit now. Sorry, I got sidetracked then. So with the Polygonal Lasso tool, you can just click, and sort of click your way around without having to do any of the pen tool curves and things like that. This is not ideal, but if that's what you're comfortable with, please go for it. Do it however you can. And then of course you'll come to the end and you'll have a selection. And once I have a selection live with the marching ants as they're called, I'm going to press the layer mask icon on the folder. So we've now got a layer mask of the t-shirt on a folder. I'm going to double click on the layer mask icon. I'm going to go to mask. I'm just going to change this feather to something like 0.2 or 3. So we're just putting a very slight feather onto that layer mask so that it won't be an unusually harsh edge. Right, now here is where we can put the colouring. And the reason why I put a layer mask onto the folder itself is we're going to have a couple of different adjustment layers in here, and then we don't have to keep masking every individual layer. So the first one I'm going to put in is a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer, which we'll put in here. And I want to click Colorize. And here you can play with the, let me just zoom out slightly so you can see, play with the hue and the saturation values. Now, what I would suggest on here is that you don't make things too saturated, because it now looks out of place for the environment. You know, the environment's quite dusky and the light's a certain way, and something that vibrant just doesn't really sit right. So just bear in mind when you're playing around with these, don't push things too far. But let's go for a colour similar to what I had on the thumbnail. Green. Well, let's just make it a green anyway, something like that, like a pale green's quite nice. Now, never use lightness, or for this at least, never use lightness to adjust the lightness and darkness of your colour, because the lightness setting within Hue Saturation tends to look bad. And to be honest, I would almost always use a curves adjustment layer in replacement of the Hue Saturation lightness slider. So it's quite often I would use a combo of Hue Saturation and a curve. And now I'll just darken this down, and you can see it looks a lot more natural now. So if I go back into the Hue Saturation and change the colour, it just fits the environment a lot better, I think. So let's do that. Okay. So what we can do now is we can bring in another image inside, and it will have all this treatment still applied to it because it's within a smart object, and it's the smart object that has all these adjustments. So I'll show you what I mean. So we've got that looking nice. We'll double click on that logo icon with this as the smart object, and we'll say, okay, we want something a bit different. So I want a custom shape from Photopea's shape library, which has got some good stuff. So let's go down and look. I mean, you can use coloured images in here. It doesn't have to be black and white. Okay, well, it kind of makes sense to have a YouTube icon. So let's just drag out a YouTube icon. Okay. Actually, let me do that again, because I made a mistake there, because I was doing the path earlier. It was still on. It was on path mode up here, even though I clicked the shape. So for shapes, obviously, you need to make sure you have shape selected. So put whatever you want in here. I'm just going to turn that other layer back on just to make sure this is roughly in the right place. Okay. Turn that off. Now, again, Command and Control S to update the smart object. Still got our layer underneath, but just turned off, so we can go back to the other design whenever we want. Exit out of that smart object to get back to the main document. And once you've got this set up, you can just keep adding designs into here and just turning the layers on and off. So again, look how quickly I can go from that YouTube design back to this design, and all the ripple and all the other effects and texture layer on the top and everything are preserved, so you don't have to do any of that stuff again. And that is the best way that I am aware to make t-shirt mockups in Photopea. If you learned a lot from this, or if you enjoyed the content, please click the like button because it really helps these videos out, and subscribe if you want to be the first to hear about new videos in the future. But for now, I will say good night and see you in the next video.